Good morning.
Morning, how
I'm
are you?
good, brother. Thank you, man. Thanks for being here. I know you have so much stuff going on right now, but I really appreciate you carving out some time to spend with us. This is going to
No,
be
it's
such an important segment too. Talking about peer support, building a peer support program, which you were part of. Ginormous agency, and now scaling back a little bit and keeping your options, in development open, just is so meaningful. So. For those of you who do not know Jared, I mean, he's just such an incredible individual, man, officer, lieutenant. He has a heart for helping others, and it shows in the years of service that he's put into trying to develop these types of programs. So, Jared is a friend of mine, and also a colleague. So, Jared, thanks for doing this, and I'll turn this over to you.
thank you everyone for the opportunity, and Dr. Dar, thank you so much. I recently retired from the Phoenix Police Department with 21 years. I was moved through the ranks, retired as a lieutenant. I guess why Dara asked me to be here and to speak on this was during my time as a sergeant, I actually got to lead a team and kind of rebuild the department there's Wellness Bureau. Currently, I retired, like I said, from Phoenix. I'm currently with the Peoria Police Department now as a lieutenant, and kind of working over there. But some of the things kind of go over, and one of the things I was really looking for as I got into the wellness, I guess, realm, I felt like I was kind of a cop's cop and didn't really know much. Matter of fact, when a friend of mine asked me to test and move over to in Phoenix, they call it the EAU, Employee Assistance Unit, I kind of laughed. I'm like, that's not me. I'm not type that likes to give hugs. I'm more, would rather put people in jail. That was more my thing I liked. So, but went home, prayed about it, talked to the family and stuff. And now probably one of the greatest things I was able to be a part of in my career, definitely the part I'm most excited about. I'm going to talk about I guess I'm going to start with and it kind of has it on a slide, but just I started in January 2016 at the Employee Assistance Unit. And whatever you want to name your wellness unit, you can. You'll hear me say EAU, Employee Assistance, or even just Wellness Unit. But and just to give a snapshot of kind of, if you haven't kind of realized what you may get into, we had a 30-day time frame within my first year that really kind of made me second guess, like, man, am I ready for this? At the time, I had 4 detectives that were assigned to the unit, and I think we all kind of went, okay, what's going to happen now? So within this 30 days, May 14th, 2016 to June 14th, 2016, we had 7 officer-involved shootings in our city. During this time, I had 3 officers that were shot. One of those officers was killed. I had another officer who was shot at but wasn't able to return fire. We had an officer involved in a serious vehicle collision. We had 2 employees who we assisted with voluntary inpatient committals. So we had a triple homicide investigation that involved 3 children that were brutally killed. And during this whole time, we also did 15 critical incident debriefs. Again, I'm a few months into this. My team had been there a little bit longer than I have, but just to kind of give you an idea of, we train in law enforcement, especially if you're sworn doing this, we train on how to do policing, but a lot of times we really don't prep for this. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So again, that's just a little bit of a, wow, welcome to trying to do wellness. So what would a wellness team really be about, right? My opinion, a wellness team is dedicated to assisting department employees and their families through confidential crisis intervention. I cannot stress confidentiality enough. Through peer support, providing resources and wellness services, ensuring the physical, emotional, and psychological well-being of department employees and their families. And I think that's a really big part. You'll hear me hit on quite a bit. It's not just for sworn, it is all department employees and their families. That's often a forgotten piece, is the family members. The goal of any unit should really be to ensure the emotional, psychological well-being, or if you want to say the total well-being of department employees. One of the things I always like to remind either new or prospective detectives or employees that I had come over is, I'm a big believer. I was an ASU fan growing up, Arizona State University, so I used to call it the pitchfork eventually, just because I didn't want to have a lot of folks in my old department who attended the school down south, and I didn't want to offend them. And get them to where they didn't want to participate as much. So I changed it to the three-pronged or three-forked approach. But I'm a big believer the first phase of that three-prong is the peer or the sworn component. So one of the things I'd always remind my sworn, whether it be wellness people or my peer support, my CISM folks, is that we're not counselors, we're not psychologists, not trained for that. But we are is we're listeners. We listen to what's going on and we try to refer people to the right places. Sometimes it's all it takes is an ear, and sometimes it's, hey, let's get you connected at the right places. But I try hard to make sure that we distinguish those different roles. So confidentiality, it kind of goes into who we are and what a wellness really should be doing. I talked about confidentiality, how important that is. Police don't trust. There's just no other way to put it. They have trust issues, and once you get there, they're loyal, but it takes a while to get there. In Arizona, and I will go with that because that's the one I know the most, we are very fortunate. Our confidentiality is actually protected through Arizona state law, and it's under Arizona Revised Statute 381111, which is part of the Officer Bill of Rights. And it actually has in there, it's called the Critical Incident Stress Management Team part of the law. So there are some exceptions that are in there, but for the most part, it actually gives confidentiality protected by state law, which gives a little bit more trust in there. I guess I just want to finish up the confidentiality part saying, if people don't trust you, they're not going to use you. And I've seen it all over the place, having to try to build trust in my former agency and seen this in other agencies where the trust is a huge factor. What kind of things can a wellness unit help out with? You're going to have your obvious ones that are kind of big out there, your critical incident or critical and traumatic incidents, crimes involving children, homicides, traffic fatalities, employee or family member in crisis, hospitals visits for sick or injured employees, things going on in folks' personal lives. Basically, it's anything that somebody deems, whether it be an employee or supervisor, that they want you to respond to. And that's huge, because if they have the courage to reach out, you need to make sure that you are going to respond and be there for them. Even if it's just listening to what they have, and maybe you can't provide resources for them, or even if you can eventually give them the resources, but somebody takes the courage to actually reach out, at least listen and try to see what you can do for them there. I get asked a lot of who should be assigned there. And trust me, this took me a while trying to pick different detectives and who we brought onto our team. Some of the things that I wrote down that really, I think, made some folks stand out from others. Credibility was one of the first ones, especially if you're looking at somebody who's sworn. You have to have credibility no matter what, but you definitely have to have the credibility if you're a sworn officer, respected by peers, and also you have to have enough time on that agency where you're respected there. Being relatable, a good listener, trusting. Again, the police, that's a very big part. Servant mentality, you're going to hear me talk about that some more. That's a really big part. Compassionate, positive, proactive. And this is something I think that really set my unit in Phoenix apart and helped us gain a lot of trust, and really allowed us to succeed in a lot of areas was our proactiveness. Our team, when we did walkabouts where we just walked around and tried to normalize wellness. We attended briefings, trainings, things like that. So we were out, we were visible, and we were trying to get out to where wellness became norm. Problem solver, honest, empathetic. The biggest part, I would say, is it's not for everyone. There's a lot of folks, especially in law enforcement, who have big hearts. That's why we come into this profession, is really to give back to the community. But when they get here, some folks find out that it's a lot harder working with peers who sometimes love, see every day, than it is dealing with the general public. So that's something, if you can kind of be upfront about from the beginning and talk to them about of how this is going to, really take an effect on you. I've had people tell me that, working homicide was actually easier on them and child crimes mentally than coming to EAU. And I've had folks want to come from those kind of details, or especially high stress detective details that are exposed to so much trauma, want to come to EAU thinking it'll almost be a break. And they find out quickly that it is much more of a mental grind. So just things to kind of think about and get out in front of. Those who have a support system at home, whether it be a great family, they have an exercise routine, they have faith to fall back on, or some kind of something like that. They seem to handle this very well as well. And then lastly, if you're a supervisor running the unit, I cannot stress this enough, check in on your folks daily. That is a huge part. You have to ensure that your people are good, because if they're not good, they're not going to be able to take care of other people. I started every shift putting my bag down and then walking around and talking to each one of my detectives, seeing where they're at. That helped me with assignments, that helped me with just ensuring they're in the right place and hopefully getting them taken care of as well. So that's what I got on who should be assigned. And then location, excuse me, I get asked this one a lot. Really, it's going to be up to your department and what works best for you. You could be looking at an offsite location because, for your agency, that confidentiality is big. And you want to have somewhere that's away from, I guess, where everyone else is. That way they can get the privacy and people can feel comfortable going there. The other option would be inside a department building. The one thing I would suggest if you're going to do inside a department building is have a private entrance or be off away. For my experience at Phoenix, I liked having us inside the building because I felt like we had a lot of people drop in. We had office hours and things like that. I felt like we actually had more connectivity that way. So that was a really big part for us. If you don't mind going to the next slide, please. And so I have excuse me. Next part I want to talk about is a psychological team or behavioral health. Sorry, we're going to be on that one right there. Thanks. Second prong, when I talk about three-prong coach, is some kind of a behavioral health or psychological team. We had the fortune of going through both. So when I was in Phoenix, we actually hired a department psychologist. There was some growing stuff with it, and a lot of it I'll say is we didn't know what we needed. We had worked with Tucson, who had a psychologist, and we looked at some other agencies, and we kind of tried to fit based on what we thought our need would be. But until we got the employee there, we didn't realize what we truly needed. And what we found is for a department our size, and just for, at the time, Phoenix had just over 3,000 sworn and about 1,000 civilian employees. For a department our size, a single person was just too much. The call out became too much, and there was just too much going on. Not to mention financially, and I have this in parts, we paid our psychologist somewhere between commander and assistant chief money. So with benefits and salary in about over $200,000. We kind of reworked it, figured out what we needed after we had that, and we went to a contracted department behavioral health team. So instead of having them on staff, it was a contract. The good part was we got more bang for our buck. We ended up getting a psychologist with approximately access to about 50 different counselors, but really we had 5 that were more focused on law enforcement. Through that, our department actually budgeted on our contract $160,000 annually. I can tell you the first cost, we had about half that cost. And as we kind of went through, we rebuilt their roles and responsibilities. And even going up, we still are well under the $160,000 a year that was budgeted. So for our experience and for us, getting more people under the contract saved us fiscally, but it also allowed us to have more resources available for our employees, and we weren't burning through the team as fast, which ended up being really important. Some of the things also you want to figure out are where you're going to locate them, how you're going to have them be there. We had them share an office space with our wellness team, which was really important. That way we were connected more, we were talking more. Figure out the roles and responsibilities, where they're going to be doing. We part of what we wanted when we went contracted was office hours. So we had 4 days a week for 7 hours a day that we had office hours that people can come down, any employee or their family member, for just, it didn't count against them. There was no insurance, there was no EAP or anything, but there's just a service we provided. We called it basically a triage to get people in the right place. So understanding what their roles and responsibilities are going to be, call out. Are you going to call them out to critical incidents, things like that? And later down the road, we ended up implementing well checks, which we got it approved in 2019, went to 2020. The first round, it was specialty details who were exposed to the highest amounts of trauma. We had both sworn and civilian. So I believe there were 14 total units that were involved in this. 12 were sworn, 2 were civilian groups. We also included probationary officers before they got out probation, so brand new employees. And part of it was to normalize behavioral health, but it was also these units that were so exposed to to high amounts of trauma, we want to make sure that we're providing a resource for them and trying to break down barriers. So we ended up adding that to our role as well. And I threw fit for duty checks on there because a lot of times people bring those up. I can tell you, if you have an in-house team, you do not want them doing the fit for duty checks. It can really affect some of the confidentiality and some of the trust. And that's a whole nother topic. I'd be happy to, if you people have questions, I'll help them later. But try to stay away from fit for duties on those. If I can get the next screen, please. Chaplains are very important for an agency. When I was in Phoenix, we had 5. That the background there is Chaplain Bob Fessmeyer. It does not matter, as important as they are, it doesn't matter the religion. And as long as you have somebody who kind of understands what their role is and that they understand the role within the agency as well. I really didn't understand that till I moved recently to Peoria Police Department and truly understood the difference in the fit with the chaplain and the agency. You will hear me refer to them constantly as chaplain. It doesn't matter what their religion is. I have on here, we had 4 Christian and 1 Jewish. My goal when I first got there was try to have one from every religion. But what I found quickly was most people really didn't care. Most of my employees and their family didn't care what faith the chaplain was from. As long as they had the credibility and they had the trust and the right fit, that's all that mattered. I never called, like Chaplain Fessmeyer here, I never called him Pastor Bob, even though that's what his denomination would count for. Or, if we had a priest with Phoenix Fire, father, whatever, I tried to stick with chaplain because, again, breaking down that whole barriers or walls, I guess, with religion and more just this is what their role is. And just to state the importance of what a chaplain can do, Chaplain Fessmeyer, who I have here, he joined the Phoenix Police Department, and in Phoenix, the chaplains are volunteers, they're not paid. So he came on April 2015, and then from that date until October 2020, Chaplain Fessmeyer actually logged over 10,500 hours of volunteer time for our department. He regularly put in over 2,000 hours a year. If you aren't aware of it, 2080 would be working 40 hours a week full-time. So this was basically his full-time job, was ministry or being a chaplain for the Phoenix Police Department. 2019 alone, he had 1,100 telephone conversations with employees and their families, 578 in-person visits, responded to 89 critical incidents, and attended 89 briefings. And on top of all this, he also assisted me in teaching family classes that we put on. So I can't overstate how important chaplains can be to your department, just overall well-being. They have to make sure that they put the work in so they can get that trust. Can you please go to the next slide? Mental health and physical resources. This is an important one when you start your unit, and anybody who works there, you have to know what's available. Like I talked about before, I don't believe we're counselors. We're not psychologists, but what we are is we're reference gatherers, or we referrals basically. So it's important that you know what's available that you can offer to employees. Part of it's working with your human resources department and understanding what your health insurances that are offered are and what's covered on those. Whether you offer a PPO, HMO, HAS, and then what specifically behavioral health is provided in there as well. I can tell you, at least in my experience, a lot of police officers are really cheap when it comes to taking care of themselves. I had a little run where our employee assistance program, they decided they weren't going to, basically they were denying almost everything. So we had a 4-month window to where we got rid of that company and brought on a new one that we really, we had employees want to reach out. And Phoenix, the police department, actually the entire city with the exception of fire is on their own EAP. And in Phoenix, the police use it more than the rest of the city combined. So it's definitely being used. That being said, when it came to the employee assistance program, and it was down for about 4 months because we were having to make an immediate change, we'd offer, hey, who's your insurance? Let's get you, I can get you connected through that way. And we had a lot of folks who were willing to wait the 4 months because they didn't want to make copays. So understanding what's available and what the costs are is important so you can get that out. I talked about employee assistance programs. That's huge. You'll see most agencies are going to have some kind of an EAP. Doing research and stuff, it looks like 4, if they have one, 4 is the minimum. Usually go up to 12 or 16. I had 12 in Phoenix. I'm currently in Peoria getting 10. And the good part is in both cities, they included employees and their household, which was big. Again, in Arizona, we had a act that pushed through that really helped when it came to mental health. And that's the Arizona House Bill 2502, which they call the Traumatic Event Counseling Bill, excuse me, or it's also called the Officer Craig Tiger Act. This one was personal to me. I actually went to the academy with Craig. We rode together. We were carpool buddies. So it was neat to get to see this go through under his name. And again, if you have more questions, I'd be happy, especially I know Dr. Darcy, we have folks from all over the world here. Essentially what this does is the bill puts responsibility on the hosting agencies to any qualifying incident. And there's, I believe, 6 qualifying incidents that if any sworn police or fire employee, sworn, so they have to be that police or fire employee, is exposed to one of these 6 qualifying incidents, they can get up to 36 counseling sessions per incident for this. So, and the agency pays. If they can be done on duty, they can be. So it's really a cool thing, and something that we were able to really provide a lot of resources for folks with that. Excuse me. I have on this other side where we start talking about some of the other resources available, and this is really important when you start up some kind of wellness team, that you have to go meet with folks. Understanding the difference between an inpatient or partial hospitalization, intensive outpatient programs, and IOP, standard counseling and what those are, the alcohol and substance abuse programs that are available, things like that, as well as some of your hospitals that are there. I can tell you, we did not refer, my team and I, we did not refer any employee to anyone we did not meet. So that was huge. We had to ensure that we were meeting with the person. I wanted to, or part of what we wanted to know was what kind of background do you have with law enforcement? And if you didn't have a law enforcement, what about military, fire, things like that, and then trauma-based. So a lot of times you'll hear people say that they have, they specialize in law enforcement, or they specialize in some kind of, the inpatient places will say, oh, we have a law enforcement wing. Very few places actually have wings that are dedicated full time to that. So those are things to find out ahead of time. When you're meeting with them, what are the costs? Do they take EAP? I can tell you inpatient's not going to, but for standard counseling, do they take EAP? And if they don't, for some of the inpatients, IOPs, things like that, what's the cost going to be? We were able to get some folks in some really great facilities for some inpatient treatment, but when they came out, they had a whole new stress with anywhere from $45,000 to $60,000 bill for this inpatient treatment. So if you can get that stuff out in the front end, that's huge. And then hospitals, if you have to put someone in there, that's always important as well. After one of our officers was killed in the line of duty, we actually created a committee who came up with a policy that we call the critical incident response policy. And it basically outlined how we were going to respond, and it's made things much smoother. So that was another really important part that can help out and help others. Get the next page, please. So critical incidents, I have on here, what's a critical incident? And I say that as, working 21 more plus years in law enforcement, I have my own definitions of what a critical incident is, but the big part I want to get people to think is understand that different events affect people differently depending on their life experiences. So obviously an officer that's shot, seriously injured in an accident or dies, something like that's going to affect a lot of people. But understand also that sometimes just performing CPR on someone may be a big deal. You don't know if they had to do CPR on somebody who's elderly. We had an employee who had done CPR on their mom a month prior and now is doing CPR on someone, and talking with them, they saw the person's face, or their mother's face while they're doing that. So things like that are important to kind of understand, of even though it may not affect you or some other people there, really try to get time to talk with folks, because different folks are affected by different things based on their life experiences. One of the things that we did, as much as we tried to hit briefings and trainings and things like that and remind folks of that we were around for as far as the wellness unit, we still didn't get calls about certain events. So in Phoenix, they had a daily duty report that was emailed out, and my team and I would go through it. And if we saw an event that we thought, hey, this may, affect somebody, we would actually reach out to them the next day, just to make sure we were following up and not leaving them out. So if your agency has some kind of a duty report or something with big incidents that gets out, that's a huge win that you can get, and make sure people aren't falling through the cracks. Employees in crisis is another big one. that's kind of the term we used. Instead of saying somebody was suicidal or had some of these other issues, in order to, it was just a phrase we used because we felt like we could talk about it different. Crisis could mean all sorts of different things. It could mean they had a suicidal ideology, they had alcohol issues, they had all sorts of stuff, but we just kind of use that as a general. So that was another one that we responded to quite a bit. Critically injured employees. One of the things that we came up with were what we called go bags that really helped out. A lot of times you have officers that are involved in the scene. They might have biological stuff on them from another person, whether it be brain matter, blood, things like that. And sometimes they can't leave the scene. So we actually partnered with our unions and got money to go buy. We just went to Walmart. We got cheap t-shirts, shorts, sweatshirts, flip-flops, things like that. So if somebody was not able to leave a scene, or say they were in the hospital and they just need some clothes, we even had little toiletry kits set up. And then we actually had an officer's wives group who donated like some change, things like that, a little journal log, hairbrush, things like that. So that way if spouses needed to come. But the good part about having that was we were able to get people out of kind of undressed or out of that situation and into a more calming place. So those go bags, we had one in every one of my team members' cars, and that really ended up being a good thing. If your agency can come up with some kind of an officer involved shooting protocol, another big one. When I first came on, you got 3 days off. Didn't matter if they were work days or your days off. If you were involved in a shooting, you got 3 days off. We progressed quite a bit, turned into our new protocol that, depending on what day of the week your shooting was, you could get anywhere from 8 to 14 days off assigned to home. There were things that had to happen during those weeks, like we had a critical incident stress debrief. You had to go shoot with your firearm. We called it firearm familiarization, and you had to have your one of your 2 psych appointments with the psychologist. And then after the 8 to 14 days, if an employee or if an officer wanted it, they could actually go to a non-enforcement temporary assignment for a couple of weeks also. So the whole point of it was trying to get that first 30 days where you might start seeing signs of PTSD in there. We wanted to ensure that the officers were good before we brought them out. So having some kind of a protocol in place is a great thing. In Phoenix, we started putting out community engagement brief or videos. So after every officer involved shooting, we put out a video that our public affairs bureau would basically was for transparency. And before the videos released to the public, we actually allow the officer to watch it. And just for wellness, we started getting to where they can invite a +1. The last thing we wanted was a spouse getting an email at work with, "Hey, I just saw, so-and-so, your spouse was involved in this incident," and they knew nothing about it. And a lot of times we in law enforcement like to downplay what occurred. So this kind of gave an opportunity in a controlled environment where we had the right resources available that we kind of go through that as well. Critical incident stress debriefings, that was a big part. It doesn't always have to be a shooting. We did those after just some events that we thought might have affected people. And the last one is, again, going back to different events affect different people. Under one of our old chiefs, we were able to come up with what we call PB time. That was just the code that we used on our timesheets. But basically what it was is if somebody had an event that was affecting them, and I have 1 to 4 shifts on there because the purpose of it was to let them have the rest of that week off to get them to their weekend. The whole point was we want to make sure they were good, they were in the right place. Now, if they did that, especially when we had our behavioral health team, we had them, part of it was you had to meet with someone. So it wasn't free time where you just got a vacation. But it was an opportunity as supervisors, something we could do to help take care of our people, get them mentally in the right place before we got them back into normal work shifts. So it was a huge part. Next slide, please. Injured and sick employees. The biggest part here is a lot of times they can be forgotten, especially when they're assigned to home. So just remember, we worked with our fiscal management bureau who had a list of everybody that was assigned, whether it be FMLA, workers' comp, whatever. Anybody who was not working, we got a list. We didn't get what they had going on, but we found out who was assigned to home. And throughout my team, we split it up and we worked with them. And we split up calling, reaching out at least monthly, making sure they were all in a good place. Sometimes it's responding to the hospital, helping supervisors out with paperwork, making sure that they're in a good place. And one of the things you'll start finding out is, especially whenever we had officers who would have like lower body injuries and things, you start working with workers comp enough, and you start realizing, hey, if they're, if you have a 2-story house and the doctor doesn't want you to put weight on your leg, there was times where we'd get because we had one officer who didn't have a bedroom downstairs, we were able to get a hospital bed delivered to the house under workers comp. so they didn't have to climb up and down the stairs. Raised toilet seats is something you wouldn't really think of, but any lower body extremity, you don't realize how far down you have to go to get on the toilet seat. So raised toilet seat was another big one that really helped out a lot of folks. We also provide rides to medical appointments for employees who didn't have that opportunity, and really got versed in FMLA, workers' comp, long-term disability, and things like that. So again, those are resources you have that really come down to helping our employees with overall wellness. Next slide, please. Employee deaths. This is always a really tough one. And not only having to deal with it in my current agency or in my agency, but assisting numerous other agencies and one of their hardest times. The biggest part I could say on this is have a plan in place. Make sure that you have a policy. What I found is a lot of places, especially if you've never had one, they want to go big and they want to do this stuff. And it almost turns into where you're doing something for one and you want to make them bigger each time. What I've seen in my experience working with numerous agencies, both police and fire, is if you have a policy in place and everyone understands this is what is done, you don't have to worry about one-upping or hurt feelings or anything else. So that really makes things important. And distinguish between a line of duty and non-line of duty. I get asked a lot of times, well, what do you do for somebody who commits suicide? One of the things that we did that I really think made it easy and we never had to deal with how they died is it was simple. We had a line of duty policy and a non-line of duty. And it didn't matter the manner in which somebody died. We treated them based on those things. So they were the employee was still being honored, the family is being honored, and you got to stay out of some of the politicalness, I guess, of things. So that really helped out with that. Remember, the family's first, department's second. So you really need to work with them, honoring their wishes. At the same point, you have that policy in place and you understand this is what we can do as far as what's available. I would assign somebody to the family immediately as a family liaison, and we were there from the time of the incident going forward, helping with planning funeral and things like that. One of the things to remember is it doesn't stop at the funeral. And a lot of times law enforcement will say that we're always here for you. And at least my experience is as time goes by, we don't do a good job of following up with that. And it's really important that we try to get up there and stay with them on those things. Some of the things that I tried to prep our families and my detectives, I tried to prep our families on is, first off, the amount of paperwork. You have the National Law Enforcement Memorial, workers' comp, federal benefits, local benefits, life insurance. There's so much paperwork that has to be done. We started creating binders that we also made electronic, and we were able to use those to kind of move forward going on. So that was a really big help going on. So understand how much paperwork there's going to be after the funeral. Also, the follow-up, making sure you're keeping in touch with that family. Again, my former agency in Phoenix, we used to call the year after the event. There were numerous events, and we explained to our families, you don't have to attend everything. They feel like they want to, but they don't have to. But we had a city, a state, and then obviously the National Law Enforcement Memorial. So we had different memorials for all that. We had an award ceremony that they were honored at, Blue Mass. We had an end of watch sign that gets put up at the location where they were killed. So all those things can really, it's almost like picking a scab and keeping it going. So mentally preparing your families for what's there and making sure they understand they can say no. So that's a lot of the parts with the deaths that just some things to think up with. Next slide, please. Resources are huge. I've talked about it. If you can get electronic resources, that is great as well, because sometimes people, employees, officers don't feel comfortable doing things at work. So having things available online is a big help. In Phoenix, we had Police Point, which is our intranet, and everything related to wellness was on our intranet. 100 Club of Arizona, and you'll see I have this shirt on. I'm actually on their board. They have been a huge resource. And going back to my time over at EAU with the wellness, they actually created the Bulletproof app, which was amazing because looking at some of the providers that were out there and some of the costs to have a wellness app were very large. I've gone to some conferences, and I think they started from $20,000 if you had a small agency to an agency as large as what I had in Phoenix would have been several $100,000. So the 100 Club of Arizona coming up with this Bulletproof app to where we could have all sorts of wellness stuff that employees could and their family members could access from home on their phones was a game changer. And then everything that we had on our intranet, we actually put on our Bulletproof. So so our Phoenix employees had all of our Phoenix resources, not to mention all of the just general resources that 100 Club had. So that was big. And then notification systems are important as well. When we are able to share what's going on, communication is a key throughout the department. So if you are able to share it, have it there. And then knowing what financial resources are available. Again, I talked about the 100 Club, who helps out with line of duty and non-line of duty deaths. They have things like the Heroes Fund. But one of the things I'm really proud of is they've put a big emphasis on public safety well-being, and they're supporting wellness training for agencies, getting people involved in those. They're also doing individual interventions and support to help out individual police and fire employees, or sworn police and fire employees as well. So knowing what you have there. In Phoenix, I had the Phoenix Police Foundation, which was a nonprofit that we were able to help. And this one was big because we were able to get some financial assistance to civilians. So that really worked out. The unions was another big one. And then third-party places out there. A lot of times you'd see folks want to start up GoFundMes. That's a great avenue, I guess, that's out there. The problem is they take large fees out. So really try to work with some of these other nonprofits and other places where financially we can help out our employees better. Next slide, please. So family is one that gets forgotten about often. And doing a ton of research through school and stuff like that, you look at all the studies that show how we change in law enforcement from when the day you start to how you go. The thing is we go through this ride and we're experiencing different things, but our family only sees the part that comes home. So that's a big part, is getting them included from as soon as you can, and really getting them to be a part of the family and understanding the changes that happen when you go into a career in law enforcement and the resources that are available. So some of the things we did is we had Recruit Day at the Recruit Family Day, which was graduation day, where we used to speak and kind of go over resources available, some of the changes you may see in your loved one who's become an officer. We also did spouse and significant other training. That's when I talked about the chaplain, Bob and I would put together and put out there. And those are kind of things that if you can invest in your families, making sure they understand the resources available, they're going to see changes in their loved one more than some of us are going to see at work. So making sure they understand the resources out there help, because they might be able to get out in front of some of the things, whether it be some kind of depression, suicide ideology, alcoholism, things like that. So it's good to have them know what's available for them. Again, some of the other things we had at my old agency over in Phoenix is we had a family day done through the Community Engagement Bureau, just trying to, again, get them to be a part of it. And then any other kind of resources you can get out there. So it's just including the family in from the beginning. It helps build stronger marriages, and hopefully helps with the divorce rate for law enforcement, which is unfortunately pretty bad, and allows them to be more involved in these things and helps out with the overall wellness. The fact is, when things aren't good at home, they're not going to be good at work. So they're going to bring that in there. So if we can get the family more involved, it's going to help out with those things. Next slide, please. Wellness training. This is a big part to build legitimacy. So here's just several of the things that we used to do. If you can get out there and train, do it. Roll call briefings, supervisor modules or supervisor trainings, families, financial, retirement readiness is something we don't talk about. I'm not talking about the financial aspect, but getting our employees mentally ready to no longer be sworn police officers is a big one. And the different topics: mental health, coping, their physical health, resiliency, resources, suicide prevention awareness. I read a study from Montreal PD, where I believe it's the province of Quebec that they're in, and there was a 22-year study. They have some amazing stuff there. So just understanding, the more training you can put out there, the more it normalizes things, which allows for better discussions. Next slide, please. I get asked about data collection quite a bit. My personal opinion is this was huge. It enabled, we started keeping stats from the day I got there. We did this confidentially. We issued people numbers, so we only knew number one. We didn't know, it was officer so-and-so. But we also would track things as far as what were they calling for? Where were they assigned? And not what squad, but what division they were in. How much time did they have on? Things like that. Through this training, we were able to actually grow. So I went from 4 detectives to 8 detectives because we were able to show them how to work we were doing. We were also able to set up training that met the needs of the department, which was big. When I first got there, I heard about PTSD and I heard all this stuff about it. But I asked how many people are we working with that are suffering from this, and none of my detectives can answer that. So sometimes having that information enables you to get with your chain of command, so they understand what's going on, again, confidentially. but they also can understand what's the needs of the department. If you can go to the next slide, please. And here's just a couple of examples. So this is 2016, 2020 for our numbers, and you could see the number of calls we got. And I can tell you, as we went through this, I started changing some of the things that we did as far as what I kept stats for. So I didn't keep great numbers at first, or I kept better numbers as we went because we started realizing more things that we needed. So like the top reasons for calling, things like that. Next slide, please. And then just more stats. This is from our CPR, who was our hired behavioral health team. And we got stats from them as well. Again, things to help out and be better. Yeah, next slide, please. Relationships is something that I cannot stress how important that is. Relationship building, that was probably one of the top things that I did when I got there. People need to understand what your unit or what your team is about and how you can help them, how you can help employees. So meeting with supervisors, unions, our internal affairs, and then regular detectives. HR is a huge resource. I cannot stress that enough, but having those relationships really are going to open doors and enable you to provide better assistance for your employees. Next slide, please. CISM peer support. Just because you have a wellness team, whether it be a 1 person or 8, 10, whatever it is, you still need to have your CISM peer support. I can tell you, I separated those when I was in Phoenix. Peer support was more like the buddy system. My CISM were the ones that would help us respond to critical incidents. So they went to the same trainings, but my peer support folks really didn't want to help out after hours was it came down to. But make sure you're providing training for them, keeping them engaged, especially if you have a team that's focused. You need to make sure that you're keeping them current with wellness ideas and training and things that are current within the wellness field. For us, we did quarterly trainings, and it was mandatory you had to attend 2 just to keep them engaged with the team. So I can go way more into this because I've got a lot more feelings on it. But anyway, they're very important to have. You've got to keep the people engaged. That's the biggest part on there. Next slide, please. Physical health. When you talk wellness, a lot of times people just think about mental health, especially when that's really become a big thing nationally. But really, the physical health is there too. It's a big way to de-stress, be healthy, and our bodies are going to feel better if we're taking care of them, right? So one of the things we do is partner with Heart Fit for Duty. Kepper Jack, amazing. She taught with us, got a lot of people in looking at their heart themselves. We had 4 or 5 employees that I know of who were full blockage, and without going through them and their screening wouldn't be alive today. So having some kind of a medical partner is a huge part. Insurance and wellness incentives is another big one that we had. We were lucky as we had a officer who was our physical fitness coordinator. So he came up with trainings and came up with programs. So somebody wanted to work on, maybe they had never worked out before and they wanted a fitness program, they would help out for that. And the fact is, we started allowing people to work out on duty, which is another big part. Fire has been able to work out for years. And one of the things being on the law enforcement side that I never understood is, we fight for our lives at times. And yet it took, at least in my agencies, most of my career before we were working on duty. So that's another big resource, and making sure you have the workout facilities available for your employees. Next slide, please. And then just some of the things that we looked at for the future, and just kind of looking and doing some research that are out there as well. Looking to have civilians on your wellness team, I think that's a huge part, to make things more relatable. So whether it be actual agency employees, excuse me, or having a civilian run the unit, the big part though is credibility and making sure that they have that there. Again, getting that work in there, partnering with whoever runs your agency's early warning system, getting that wellness component in there and ensuring that it truly is a wellness part is big. A wellness center is something Phoenix I know is currently working on. Therapy animals was a big one that the sergeant came in after I was able to get up and running. Is they had 2 dogs. But if you're going to have any kind of a therapy animal, I really suggest that you understand and come up with ahead of time where you're going to bring them out. You can't bring them out to every scene, especially in Phoenix in the summer. You have to worry about the heat and things like that, but also, scene contamination stuff. So they're an amazing resource. Taking a dog on a walkabout when you're just going to visit with people is a great icebreaker. But understanding how the agency is going to pay for the animal, the upkeep with the animal, and when you're going to have them there. Expanded well checks, my opinion, that should just be a mandatory thing for all law enforcement. Get it early, make it mandatory, so there's not this stigma and there's not the, well, you're weak because you go. If it becomes normal, then people can have it. And I don't think everyone needs counseling, so that's not what I'm trying to say. What I am saying is that they need to have some kind of a just checkup, because this job, the trauma we're exposed to affects a lot, and then mentorship programs as well. Next slide, please. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions, I know I kind of slammed through a lot of this stuff. My personal email is the Gmail. That's my city email underneath. That is my personal cell phone number. It's just the easiest way to get in touch with me. I work nights 4 days a week. So please leave a voicemail or text me. But I'm happy to answer any questions and help out. The bottom part is a webpage I have for one of my master's programs. I wrote, my capstone was on how to build a wellness program. So if you have any questions, or if you just want to know where to start, because that was something I didn't know what to do, that's kind of why I put it together. Was just not that it's the end all be all, but it at least gives, the stuff that I get asked by other agencies and that questions I had when I started. So anyway, thank you all for your time. And if you have questions, I think we have a couple minutes, please.
Jared, thanks so much for sharing that information, man. Talking about the guts of the EAU is so important, because I think that people don't know sometimes where to start to build a program, And what you described is that it's really a multifaceted approach, and you could build this as you go, but having solid policies in place from the beginning will really alleviate a lot of headaches for you, because something that you differentiated here earlier on was between the line of duty deaths and then the non-line of duty deaths, which I think was so important, because one of the most common questions that we get is, well, how do you treat suicide cases? As you know, and so this makes it tough, but it makes it really easy once you have the non-line of duty deaths, and then everybody feels honored and respected for the duty that they serve the entire career, and not just for one act.
Absolutely, and it does. That's probably one of the number one questions I get asked all the time, and it does. It takes the feelings out of it, which is important, because we're all going to be emotional at times like that.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you've been to your fair share of funerals and planning things out for many departments. Somebody might ask, how do you take care of yourself? I get asked that question a lot, and I think that's one of the toughest questions that people ask me. So what do you do to be able to manage all of this? Because you've seen a lot of death, you've been part of a lot of ceremonies. Tell me about that for you.
Yeah, for me, it starts with my family. My wife and I have been together almost 20 years. I've got 3 kids. So really, my faith and my family are what grounds me. I really see this as a calling, and I think having the faith and family support helps me stay grounded. It's funny, because it was definitely the most stressful time in my career. The nearly 5 years I was there. But my wife to this day will say she actually liked me better when I was working there, just because even though it was a higher stress, I think I handled it better than I do being on the street. And I think it was that higher calling type thing. But for me, the family, faith, exercising, getting out there, making sure we're doing those kind of things, that's a huge part, as well as getting some kind of, and by no means am I ever going to be, compared to Arnold Schwarzenegger, but as simple as, just walking a couple miles a day, things like that. Those things really help me out.
That's very practical and easy to follow, I think. How big was your employee assistance unit's team? So if people are starting this off, usually they want you to take on more than you think you could bear. And that has worked against some people in the past, where they don't have enough, human power to be able to support them and their mission.
Yeah, so when I took over, we had 4 detectives and myself. Over the nearly 5 years, we were able to grow the unit to 8 detectives, because that's what we needed. And luckily, we had a command staff and a couple of chiefs that really supported, and we're all about wellness. But we've been able to work with agencies all across Arizona, and they have as little as a 1-person team. And that's the important part, is understanding it doesn't have to be, I was fortunate I worked in Phoenix where we had 8-person team. I'm now at Peoria, and they have 1 person doing it. So you can do it with 1 person. The one thing I would caution is, if you only have the manpower to assign 1 person to it, at least utilize your CISM folks, because you're going to burn out your 1 person if they're on call all the time. And that was probably the biggest thing, that going up to the 8, we were able to keep more attention with my folks, because they weren't burnt out from responding as often. So if you have your one person as your coordinator, that is a great thing, but have some other folks who are versed in this and are willing to and pay them the overtime. And that's something I talk with the chiefs a lot about, but get them responding to events and make sure you're rotating that out so you don't get burnt out.
Very important point, and I think that I'm going to have someone speak with you directly to be able to figure out how to gain support and to prevent that burnout, because that is crucially important. We see a ton of comments inside of here. Obviously, people love your presentation because some people said it's very practical. It helps to be able to break down stigma on a complicated topic. The therapy dog stuff obviously struck a chord. People do love their therapy pets to be able to make sure. And what you had said was true, which is sometimes it's just too hot to bring the therapy animal out to be able to help with that person. But it doesn't mean that they can't have access to it indoors or another way, right, later on.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing, is having it there, having it as a resource. Like I said, the walkabouts were huge. Having them on CISDs was another big part. So just having it available, they break down walls, they break barriers. A lot of times, people will open up more. We've seen it in CISDs where they're just sitting there petting the dog and they're opening up more. So it's a great resource, but make sure we're taking care of the animal. And especially if it's a crime scene, work with the detectives, because they are animals, and we want to make sure say the dog's not pooping in the middle of a crime scene or something like that you're going to get naysayers with it. And I've heard it both in Phoenix and Peoria. Oh, there's the comfort dog or whatever. But the fact is it does work, but don't give the naysayers, I guess, another reason to say, hey, this isn't worth it.
Yeah, good point. Kimberly had asked if the dogs were contracted out or if they were in-house.
So for Phoenix, we went through, and Amy, I saw, answered that. So thanks, Amy. We went through the Fetch Foundation, which was great. So they were able to get us the dogs for free. Now, it was part of the contract was they could take them back if we weren't treating them right. Obviously, we had handlers who treated them great. And then through our canine, we were able to get them food and vet and stuff through our canine program. So that was huge help as well. So we kind of had those things in place. I think the biggest thing we had, again, every location across the world is going to have different things. The heat in Phoenix, like one of our big concerns, our canine vehicles for our regular police response stuff have AC units that stay on. They have automatic alerts or something and things like that if the dogs are in there too long. So it was just making sure we're taking care of the dogs. That was something that the unit or the supervisor had talked about with the handlers, to make sure dogs help.
That's really great. And Lisa was asking, is there a certification process for therapy dogs for the police department specifically? Certified?
Yeah, every department's gonna have their own. We were fortunate. Fetch actually brought them. One of them was actually a full-on service dog. So unfortunately, the person that had the dog wasn't able to take care of it. So they gave us, and I mean, the dog could do everything, pick up keys and all that other stuff. The other one, through Fetch, they were able to get them at least trained up to where we didn't have to worry about them biting and things like that. So off my experience, or through Phoenix, I will say Fetch was able to handle a lot of that. You're gonna have to work with your agency, their legal unit, things like that, because you do want to ensure that you at least put them through some kind of training, so that way those are taken care of. And whether it be, I see someone put on their rescue animals and stuff, if you want to get an animal and then put it through the training, definitely work through your chain of command and work through your legal unit just to ensure.
My cousin in Hawaii, Maui, Hawaii, Craig, said that AMR, so for the GMR, AMR folks, Craig, nice to see you on here. I'm glad to hear that you guys have therapy dogs available on request as well. And then Anthony from Scottsdale PD said that they are home to the nation's first full-time police crisis response canine program. That's really interesting. And they have 3 crisis response canines. Check out Pet Partners for Therapy. That's interesting. I don't know if you've worked with them before, Jared, or heard anything about that.
No, I have not. Definitely look into that.
Yeah, really, really cool. And Mary, just people love their animals, man. And so, you start talking about dogs, and of course, I mean, it's great. They're just a great technique and therapy tool to use.
Absolutely.
Well, I am going to say thank you so much, Jared, sorry for extending you over here a little bit, but thank you very much for doing this and the meaningful presentation that you give. and I'm certain that we will hear lots of follow-up from it. So thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And seriously, if anyone ever has any questions, I don't have all the answers, but I can definitely give you experience or give you answers based on the experience we've had. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks.
Thanks, brother. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Thanks. Bye.